to my channel. My name is Charlotte and this is Charlotteshelves. In today's video I have a book tag video for you. This is the 10 Untouched Books tag. I first saw this tag going around via Heroic Book Adventures, who is another booktuber here. I will pop a link to their channel below. They created a great video talking through 10 of the books that have been sitting on their TBR for the longer periods of time. And then this is also originally created by another booktuber called Rainier books, I believe. And I'll put their details as well. So if you want to join in or watch their videos, you absolutely can. I have selected 10 books that have been sitting on my TBR for the longest amounts of time. Some more recent through to the ones that have been on there the longest. This is not to say that this is the size of my TBR. As you know, if you've watched any of my videos, my TBR is probably in the 40s, 50s. I tried to pick books that are sitting on my TBR each for a particular different reason, because there's a lot of reasons why a book can stagnate on your bedside table for a while, or in your reading cart or your shelves. There are many reasons, and each of these I'm going to share a different reason as to why it's still unread. Before I start sharing these books with you, let me know in the comments, what do you think is the longest period of time for which I've held onto a book? Because this one down here, this will be the last one that I reveal. I don't think you'll be able to guess how long this has been on my TBR. Would be curious to see what your guesses might be, and then come back to your comment and see if you were correct. If you haven't already, please like, comment and subscribe, and let's get started. The first book I have is a thriller, and I haven't read this because I think it's going to be crap. And this is The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I purchased this in February of this year, so I've had it on my TBR about 9 months, which isn't too long for me at all. I really loved The Silent Patient, which was also by Michaelides, and when this came out I grabbed a copy once it was out on paperback. The reviews that I've seen for this since have been awful. It has a very low score on Storygraph and Goodreads, and that is what put me off it a little bit. I do know we aren't meant to just judge books based on scores and things like that, but this one particularly has had a lot of criticism, and I'm not sure if it's because The Silent Patient was such a great, twisty, dark thriller that any book that kind of follows up from that I think will get compared to it. So I wonder if people have critiqued this quite harshly because it doesn't match up to The Silent Patient. I do want to read this for myself and make my own decision at some point in the future. I can't imagine how hard it must be for an author to have a huge international greatest selling kind of book and then have to try and follow that up with your next piece of art. So I'm hanging on to it so that I do give it a second chance, but that's why it's been on my TBR for about 9 months. The following book has been on my TBR for, I got it for Christmas last year, so at least 11 months nearly, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I haven't read this because I think it's going to break my heart, and I think I've said that in other TBR videos before, that this is one that I feel like I am just saving. I want to be in a kind of emotionally resilient place before I read this. I do believe it's meant to be beautifully written. I've heard that this is a deeply moving but heartbreaking love story, and I don't feel currently very emotionally resilient to reading something that could potentially devastate me, and that's why this has been on my TBR for that amount of time. I've just not found time in the last year or so where I've gone, I feel like a good cry, because I've had plenty to cry about in my real life. This particular edition is so gorgeous. I know I've shared it a couple of times on my channel, and I think I want to be able to give it the attention it deserves when I go into reading this, because this is one I don't want to DNF. I think I love her writing style. I've read 2 of her other books, and that is why I've kind of been saving this. Saving the devastation for a day when I feel a little bit more resilient. The next book that I've got is on my Kindle, and I've written on my notes that I've just got down here that it's been on it at least for a year. I think it's been on longer than a year, and it's called Whalefall, and it's a sci-fi horror type thriller, and it's about a person who is essentially in the ocean. They get swallowed by a whale and they have to try and escape or stay alive. And I think the novel is also told in a duration of period of how much oxygen they have left in their scuba gear, so it kind of ups that intensity. And if you have watched previous videos of mine, you know that one of my phobias is large expanses of water or deep water, anything like that. And I think this has been on my Kindle for a really long time, because I cannot tell you how much of an intense phobia it is, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to read it, because it's just one of those things. And often with phobias you can't explain why something taps into your psyche in a particular way, but I think Whalefall is going to be one that I really want to read it. I think that concept is so bonkers and intriguing, but I think it's going to be too suffocating for me and my own phobias and neuroses. So that is why that one has been on my my Kindle for God knows how long. The next book that has been sat untouched on my TBR for a really long time is Feed, and this is a zombie kind of horror thriller hybrid novel, but I put this on my spooky season TBR and I didn't get to it this year. I've had it over a year, at least over a year, and I think ultimately what's put me off is this is about 600 pages in length, and I think it's a new author. I haven't read any zombie lit in a while, and I think committing to a 600 page book over Halloween when I had such a large TBR this year of books that I wanted to get through, that is why this is sat on my TBR, and it probably will sit on it for another year because I will want to save this, I think, for next sort of August, September, October as we get into or back into spooky season. So this is one that has just been untouched simply due to length. There's nothing, it still appeals to me. I still love what this, I believe this book is about. It's just, I didn't have time to read it in spooky season. Next paperback, this is another one that's been over a year, maybe 2 years. We're kind of getting into that time frame for these books. It's called Men Who Hate Women, The Extremism That Nobody Is Talking About by Laura Bates. This is meant to be phenomenal, and the only reason I haven't picked this up is because I know it's going to be heavy going. It is largely about violence against women and girls, but it's also looking at incel culture, the far right extremism. There's some aspects of I don't know if you would call them a terrorist group, but the men's rights activist groups and things like that. She goes undercover and does a lot of really deep research about these more niche subcultures in society, but the cultures that are predominantly targeted against women and girls. And I think this is going to be heavy. I want to be able to really go in with a really lucid and present frame of mind, because I think I'm going to find this fascinating. Seeing a lot of books that are talking about the dangers of incel culture and things like that, I know that it is a threat and a risk in society, and we do see it in the news, but this is a book that I can hopefully learn more about those types of subcultures as well. I think it will be fascinating, and just because it's heavy going, that's the reason I haven't picked it up yet. The next book on my TBR that has been on, I think, a couple of years now is called The Silence Project by Carol Hiii. I have put this on a couple of seasonal TBRs and reading lists that I've wanted to get to, and I truly don't know why I haven't got to this sooner. It's sometimes newer books that come in have more of a likely chance of being read than the older ones, and sometimes a book just sits on your shelves and it starts to lose that tantalizing appeal, really. But this is a kind of, I think it's about a female-only cult or commune and some other things that go on with that. I think it's described as a compelling page turner, so I do know it's a thriller, but everything about this would tick boxes for what I love to read. I love thrillers, reading books about cults and things like that. This is also blurbed as being engrossing and original. This book will get people talking. So much of this appeals to me, and I just don't know why I haven't got to it sooner. Some of these books on my list, I can absolutely pinpoint why I haven't quite got to them, but this one is a mystery to me, and that's why I picked it. Next book is another thriller, but a lot darker. This is Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. I think I've said this before, she pronounces her name as Gillian Flynn, and I always feel weird not pronouncing it how she pronounces her own name, if that makes sense, whereas in England we pronounce this with a soft G. I haven't read this because I really loved Gone Girl. I think I've put this on TBRs again as well and still haven't got to it. This has been on my TBR for 3 years at this point, and this is the last of her books that I have to read. I think she's only written 4 books in total anyway, and I think I've just been waiting for the right time to read this because I think her writing style is top tier. I think she's one of the best thriller writers, which is why I think I've been saving this, because I do perceive her to be probably one of the best thriller writers actually in terms of style and plot and everything that she packs into these books. I have heard that this is horrible. Like, I've heard it's distressing, very creepy and unsettling, and because of how dark, not to keep using the word dark to describe her works, but because of how dark I perceive this might be, I think I've felt a bit spooked about picking this up. Like, I've had reservations because of the reputation that precedes this book, and that's why I haven't read it yet. I think I'm going to love it. I think this will be a 5-star read for me, absolutely. And I think I've kept it in my arsenal for this long because once I've read this, I have no other books of hers to read. So, I need to read this soon. 3 years. We are jumping forward in time now. We are getting into 3 of the oldest books that have been on my TBR. This next book is a poetry anthology and a collected work of a poet that I really, really love. I also really adore these Faber and Faber editions. I have been collecting these. I have Larkin's one, and I also have Alden's and someone else's, but I really like them. They're lovely. And also the good thing about them is they do actually have, the font is a nice size, but then you get enough space if you want to annotate. What is ultimately putting me off reading this, and has done for 5 years, is that I know when I go into this, I want to go through a lot of the poems that I love and properly annotate them, study. I want to do some close textual reading and poetry analysis. That is going to take me a few weeks probably, dipping in and out of this, firstly reading it, then going back through and that sort of thing. And it's just finding the time and the space mentally to commit to doing it. There are, like I said, there's other anthologies that I have since prioritised and spent some really nice time in close textual analysis with. I've just been putting this off and I don't know why. This is my penultimate book, and I think, if I'm correct, this has been on my TBR about 6 years. I bought this on holiday in a charity shop, which is how I kind of know when I think it was. I think I bought this in 2019. The reason I think I've saved this is because when I love an author, I want to read all their books. But there comes a point where I have read everything but maybe 1 book or 2 books, and then I kind of stop. Because then I realise once I've completed and read that author's entire works, I've got nothing else of theirs to consume. I've done it, I've completed it. And this author that I particularly love is literary fiction, literary historical fiction, and that is Tracy Chevalier. This is Remarkable Creatures, and I think I have this and her new book that's come out, The Glass Makers or Glass Blowers. Those are the only ones I have left to read, and that means I'm done with her. There's something quite sad about the idea that I will have no more pieces of her art to enjoy, and sometimes I watch videos where people are like trying to read all of Stephen King's work and try and get through all of them, and I think that once he dies, for example, not to be too morbid, he will have no more work for us to read and enjoy, and I will have no more Stephen King books to enjoy for the very first time. And that's why I kind of like to stagger and pace, if I love an author, to not binge all their work. I like to have some level of restraint because I only get to read her, I think she's written 7 books at this point. You only get to read those 7 books once. I hope that makes sense. The final book, which has been on my TBR the longest, you will, don't judge me. This has been on my TBR for 16 years. I held onto this book throughout university. I've moved house multiple times. I have rented. I have been all over the place with it, and I still haven't read it. And there isn't a concrete reason for why. I love this author. One of her books is my favourite, top 5 favourite novels of all time. So this is the children's book by A.S. Byatt, and this is a copy that came out, it would have been the exact date this was published. So this is a 2009 hardback edition. I think this is a first edition. This was gifted to me by my aunt, who is no longer with us. And I think that's partly also why I've held on to it. Byatt wrote this phenomenal book called Possession, and that won so many awards, and off the back of that it made me want to read more of her works. And I read a collection of short stories by her, and then I read 2 novellas in 1 book, and I didn't enjoy either of them, so I took a beat and a pause for reading more of her work. And beautiful edition, and I think that's partly why I've held on to it as well. I think that it was a gift from a relative. I think that I cannot tell you how much I loved Possession by her, and based on that, I think that's why I've hung on to it. There's not a lot of reasons to why I keep a book around for 16 years. I can't pin down one reason, and maybe it's lots of little reasons, which means I've kept this for as long as I have. Maybe because it's the last gifts of my aunts that I think I've kept, or I don't know. And it's not always easy, is it, when you have a book, it's not always easy when you have a TBR of like 40 odd books to say why some you kept, why some you've let go. And this one doesn't sit in one singular or easy category as to why I've kept it. But this is the longest untouched book on my TBR. I hope I read it in the future. Her writing style is magnificent. It's literary fiction, and I hope it's not another 16 years until I read this. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching my 10 untouched book tag video. If you are watching this, please consider yourself tagged. I would love to see if you have any reasons just as bizarre as I do as to why I've hung on to these particular 10 books. My question for this video is, what is the book and the title and the author that has been currently sat on your TBR the longest? And also, if you can figure out why do you think that is? Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you haven't already, please do like, comment and subscribe, and happy reading.